The Everan forest had an almost sentient air about it, ancient and brooding. It wasn't just the height of the twisted trees or the shadows they cast. It was the way those shadows moved, seeming to watch the adventurers as they picked their way through the forest's underbrush. The forest canopy filtered the sunlight, creating a world cast in shades of green and gray, where visibility was scarce and imagination filled in the gaps. Tritan, the leader of the group, kept his hand near his sword hilt, his eyes constantly scanning the narrow path that wound through the trees. Tritan was a man born for leadership, though he often resented the weight of it. He was a fighter, yes, but more than that, he had a sense of justice and duty ingrained in him that none of his companions shared. Grell's mission, the retrieval of an ancient dragon statue, had unsettled him from the start, but he'd swallowed his concerns for the sake of the gold and the thrill of adventure. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that this task would demand more from them than they were prepared to give. Mezra walked beside him, her presence calm and steady. The elven sorceress exuded an air of quiet strength, her features serene as she took in the forest around them. Her connection to the natural world seemed to pulse through her fingertips as she traced invisible patterns in the air, sensing the ebb and flow of magic around them. Tritan had grown to trust her instinctively. Her wisdom had saved their lives more than once. She turned her head slightly, sensing his gaze, and offered a brief nod as if to say she felt his unease too. Behind them, Grod the dwarf clomped along, his short, powerful frame moving with a begrudging sort of determination. Every so often, he muttered complaints under his breath about the dampness of the forest, the length of the journey, and the nobleman who had sent them on it. Though his words were often laced with irritation, there was a grit to him that Tritan respected. Grod may have been a grumbler, but he was dependable, a warrior through and through, with an iron heart as tough as the axe slung over his shoulder. Lana walked several paces behind Grod, her movements graceful and feline. She was less interested in the mission itself and more in what she could gain from it. Grell's promises of treasure had lit a fire in her eyes that hadn't dimmed since they'd left Omeris. She moved silently, almost blending with the shadows, her gaze darting between her companions, assessing each of them as though calculating their worth. And then there was Venn, the bard. He sauntered along at the rear of the group, his expression half amused as he surveyed the towering trees and creeping mist. Venn lived for moments like these, not for glory or wealth, but for the sheer, thrilling absurdity of the journey. He had no delusions of grandeur. He was here because the prospect of the unknown enchanted him. Even now he hummed a soft tune, seemingly oblivious to the tension that filled the air. It was Venn's way of pushing back against the grim nature of their mission, as though the melody alone could chase away the darkness around them. Together, the 5 adventurers pressed deeper into the forest, each step taking them further from the safety of the familiar. As the path before them narrowed, it felt like the forest itself was guiding them, drawing them towards something ancient, something powerful. The weight of destiny seemed to settle upon them, heavy and inescapable, as the Everan forest grew darker with every step. The memory of Timonius Grell lingered like a shadow over Tritan as they made camp that night. The fire crackled and spat, casting fleeting shadows on the forest floor as the adventurers huddled close. Tritan's mind drifted back to that grand chamber in Omeris, the scene still vivid despite the miles they'd traveled since. Grell's estate had been a testament to wealth and excess, each corner crammed with artifacts collected from across the realms. Ancient scrolls, cursed relics, weapons that had seen countless battles. They all filled the room, each item a trophy of Grell's insatiable hunger for rarity and power. The nobleman himself had been resplendent in fine robes, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling intensity as he'd spoken of his newest obsession. Tritan could recall every word of the offer Grell had extended.
It is not merely a statue, you understand. This red dragon holds properties, unique properties. Imagine, Tritan, what someone with the right disposition might achieve with such a relic.
Even as Grell's words faded into memory, Tritan felt a chill crawl up his spine. It wasn't just the cold of the night air. It was a foreboding sense that their employer's motivations were far darker than he'd let on. Grell hadn't simply wanted an artifact for his collection. He desired something with the potential to bend the world to his will. Mezra, seated across the fire, must have noticed his somber expression. Her eyes met his, and there was a knowing look in her gaze. She too had felt the darkness in Grell's words, the veiled promises of power. Elves were deeply attuned to the intentions that lingered behind words, and Tritan knew she shared his unease. Grod snorted, pulling Tritan from his thoughts.
"Pompous noble,"
he muttered, tossing a stick into the flames.
"Always sending others to do their dirty work. You'd think he'd at least have the decency to face that dungeon himself."
Lana's gaze flickered to him, her face a mask of irritation.
If he did, there'd be nothing left for us, would there?
She retorted, a glint of greed flashing in her eyes.
I, for one, am glad he's letting us take the risks.
Venn chuckled softly, reclining against a log.
Maybe Grell's smarter than he looks,
he mused.
He knows the risks, and he's got us to face them for him. That, my friends, is cunning.
They laughed lightly, though the sound was hollow in the dense silence of the forest. Despite their bravado, each of them understood the dangerous game they were playing. And as the fire burned low, Tritan's gaze drifted back to the dark shadows cast by the flames, wondering if he had led them all into a trap they might not escape. The morning dawned cold and mist-shrouded, a pale light filtering through the trees as the party gathered their supplies. The Everan forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if holding its breath in anticipation. Tritan noticed the tension among his companions as they prepared to set out. Lana's sharp gaze lingered on each of them, calculating as if assessing who would make it out of this journey alive. Grod was in particularly sour spirits, grumbling under his breath as he tightened the straps on his armor.
"If I'd known it'd be this freaking far, I'd have charged Grell double,"
he muttered, though his words were directed more at himself than anyone else. Lana, catching his complaint, rolled her eyes.
If you want out, Grod, I'm sure the rest of us can manage without the added deadweight.
The dwarf scowled, his hand flexing over his axe.
"Dead weight? Ha! At least I'm here for the mission, not my own selfish gain."
She gave a mocking smile, crossing her arms.
Oh, please. As if any of us are here for noble reasons. Let's not pretend we're doing this out of some grand sense of duty.
Tritan silenced them with a glare, his tone cold as he addressed the group.
Enough. We have a task, and I expect all of you to focus on it. Leave your personal grievances for another time.
Venn, who had been watching with a bemused smirk, interjected.
Triton's right. Besides, if we're all dead, there'll be no squabbling over treasure at all.
With a forced silence settling over the group, they resumed their journey, moving deeper into the forest. Tritan's words weighed on them, but so did their own doubts. Lana's manipulations, Grod's grievances, and Venn's detachment, all of it simmered beneath the surface, each of them hiding secrets, grievances, and fears that would have to wait. It was near dusk when they stumbled upon the archway. The structure was partially hidden, draped in thick vines and moss, its stone surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. There was a hush in the air, a weight that pressed down on them as they approached. The silence was nearly absolute, broken only by the sound of their boots crunching over loose gravel. Tritan studied the archway with a frown. The carvings etched into the stone were faded but intricate, depicting scenes of dragons and ancient warriors locked in combat. Mezra reached out, her fingers brushing the surface as she closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration.
"This place is old,"
she murmured, almost to herself.
"The magic here is dormant, yet powerful. It feels as though it's waiting for something."
Lana stepped forward, eyes bright with curiosity.
If it's waiting, then let's not disappoint. There's treasure on the other side of this archway. I can feel it.
Feel it, or just wish for it?
Grod muttered under his breath, though he stepped forward with the rest. They exchanged wary glances before Tritan took the lead, stepping beneath the archway with a resolve that belied his own fears. One by one, the others followed, each crossing into the unknown with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. The tunnel beyond the archway led them downward, winding into the earth like the throat of some enormous beast. The walls, damp and encrusted with lichen, seemed to close in around them, the air thick with an ancient, musty scent that hinted at secrets buried deep beneath the forest floor. Flickering torchlight cast their shadows against the walls, distorting their forms and making each adventurer seem more monstrous than human. Tritan took the lead, every sense on high alert. He felt responsible for his companion's safety, and the weight of that duty pressed down on him with each step. Behind him, Mezra walked with a calm assurance, her keen elven eyes observing every detail, every crack and crevice. Magic buzzed faintly around her, a subtle energy that Tritan sensed even without understanding its mysteries.
Keep close, and watch your step,
he warned, his voice a low murmur that barely carried over the muffled sound of their footsteps. The passage eventually opened into a large chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. Stone statues lined the walls, their faces eroded by time but still faintly menacing, as though watching them with hollow eyes. Mezra paused, sensing a faint, pulsing magic in the air. She touched Tritan's arm and gestured silently to the statues.
"These were guardians once. They are inert now, but I wouldn't trust them not to wake, should we disturb the wrong thing."
Venn, ever the performer, chuckled softly, trying to lighten the tension.
Noted. Let's try to avoid giving them cause to take offense.
Grod huffed, hefting his axe.
If one of those statues even twitches, it'll be rubble before it can get a second chance.
Lana, however, ignored the statues entirely, her gaze fixed on the far side of the room, where a heavy stone door loomed. She moved toward it, her fingers itching to test the lock. Greed sparkled in her eyes as she imagined the treasures waiting beyond.
Lana, wait,
Tritan commanded, his tone firm, but she merely scoffed, throwing him a look over her shoulder.
I'm here for the gold, remember? I don't need a lecture on caution.
Tritan tensed, every instinct warning him that this place was more dangerous than it appeared. But he couldn't stop Lana as she knelt, her nimble fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the door. Mezra's gaze flicked to Tritan, and she murmured,
"She'll do what she wants, as always. Keep your guard up."
The tension in the room grew thick as Lana worked. At last, she managed to release the door's ancient lock with a triumphant grin, and with a low rumble, the stone door creaked open. The stale air that greeted them was colder, carrying an acrid metallic scent that none of them could place.
What is that smell?
Venn whispered, his usual humor subdued.
"Blood and iron."
Mezra replied grimly, her fingers tightening around her staff.
"Whatever lies beyond this door isn't eager to see us."
But they pressed on, each step carrying them further from the safety of daylight and deeper into the forgotten heart of Everan. The massive chamber with its vaulted stone ceiling seemed to stretch endlessly, like the hollow rib cage of some ancient beast. At its heart stood the red dragon statue they had been searching for, magnificent, imposing, and terrible. The dragon's stone eyes gleamed, as if alive, and its fanged mouth was open in a silent roar. A faint red glow pulsed from the statue, casting eerie shadows on the faces of the adventurers. Triton's breath hitched as he took in the statue's imposing form.
There it is,
He whispered.
the dragon statue of legend.
But Mezra was uneasy. The energy radiating from the statue was far from welcoming.
This is no mere statue. It is a conduit, binding something far darker and more dangerous within.
Lana scoffed.
What do you want to do? Leave it here?
She stepped forward, unable to resist the lure of such a valuable prize. The greed in her eyes was unmistakable, and it pulled her closer to the statue, heedless of the danger.
Careful, Lana.
Triton hissed. But it was too late. As Lana's fingers brushed the cool stone, the statue flared with a blood-red light, the glow piercing the darkness of the chamber. A rumbling filled the air, and cracks spread across the statue's surface, as if it were straining against the magic that had bound it for so long. Mezra's eyes widened as she felt the containment spells fray.
We need to reinforce the bindings. Now!
She gripped her staff, muttering arcane words as she wove magic to try to stabilize the stone. But the dragon statue was fighting back. The energy that erupted from it sent Mezra stumbling back, her spell scattering as the magic in the chamber churned violently. Venn grabbed Mezra's arm, pulling her to her feet as the room filled with crackling red energy.
What the hell is going on?
Venn muttered, the dry humor gone from his voice.
Something ancient is waking.
Mezra replied, grim and resolute. Triton, sensing the escalating danger, shouted,
If we're taking the statue, we do it now, but we'll need every ounce of strength.
With a grunt, Grod lunged forward, swinging his axe at the ground beneath the statue. He struck fiercely, weakening the stone pedestal it was mounted on.
If it won't come quietly, we'll make it.
He growled through clenched teeth. His strikes broke the pedestal apart, causing the statue to topple over, but the ancient energy surrounding it lashed out in retaliation. A tendril of red energy whipped out and struck Grod, sending him sprawling across the chamber. He hit the wall with a bone-jarring thud, groaning as pain shot through his body. Blood trickled down his face, but he still managed a defiant glare at the statue, his eyes blazing with determination.
Triton, hurry!
Mezra urged, her face pale as she staggered under the strain of containing the magic. Triton and Venn scrambled to lift the statue, its weight immense, almost as if resisting their efforts. With a strained grunt, they heaved it between them, but not without paying a price. The dark magic bit into their flesh, searing them with raw, burning pain. Venn's hands blistered, and Triton felt his muscles ache as if they were being torn apart.
Lana!
Triton barked.
Grab what you can and help us!
Reluctantly, Lana abandoned her frantic search for more treasure, helping them drag the statue across the chamber toward the exit. Mezra held up her staff, weaving a protective barrier that deflected some of the red energy lashing out from the broken pedestal. Her strength was fading, her vision swimming, but she gritted her teeth and poured the last of her energy into the barrier. As they staggered out of the chamber, the ground shook and the walls began to crumble. The magical backlash of breaking the statue's binding surged through the dungeon like a tidal wave. Rocks fell around them, each rumble of stone an ominous reminder that their time was running out. With a final burst of strength, they managed to clear the chamber, the cursed statue, now theirs, but at a great cost. Once outside the dungeon, the adventurers collapsed onto the forest floor, panting heavily. They had barely escaped the crumbling depths with their lives. Triton's arms and shoulders throbbed from the strain of carrying the statue. Venn lay sprawled beside him, his hands blistered and burned, grimacing in pain. Lana clenched her jaw as she inspected a nasty cut on her leg. The injuries of battle marked each of them, but it was Grod who bore the worst. His left arm hung limply, likely dislocated, and bruises mottled his face from where he had been thrown against the wall. Yet he gritted his teeth and barked out a bitter laugh.
Now that was one hell of a situation,
He growled, clutching his injured arm.
We freaking came out of that nonsense alive, didn't we?
Mezra staggered, propping herself up with her staff. her face drawn and pale. The strain of using her magic to contain the dragon statue's energy had left her visibly weakened, but she forced a smile.
Alive, yes, though I wouldn't mind a quieter adventure next time.
Tritan looked over the battered group, a strange feeling of pride welling up despite their injuries. They had achieved the impossible and retrieved the statue. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that they were bringing something dangerous back to Omeris.
Let's head home,
He said, his voice rough but steady.
We've done what we came for.
But as they gathered themselves, he couldn't help noticing the faint, ominous glow that still pulsed from the statue. It seemed hungry, as though their battle had only stirred something within it. He cast a worried glance at Mezra, who nodded, understanding his unspoken concern.
There may be consequences,
She murmured. But none of them dared linger any longer. Their journey back to Omeris was long and grueling, each step carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The adventurers limped into Omeris as dawn broke, exhausted and bloodied. Their arrival at Lord Timonius Grell's estate was far from triumphant. The nobleman greeted them with barely concealed impatience, his gaze sharpening when he saw the dragon statue in their possession.
You have returned.
Grell remarked, his voice filled with smug satisfaction as he appraised the statue.
And it appears you've managed to secure my prize after all. I knew my investment would pay off.
Tritan straightened, despite his exhaustion.
It wasn't easy.
He replied, his voice rough.
This statue is bound by dark magic. Magic that nearly killed us to break free.
Grell merely waved a dismissive hand.
A pity about your injuries, but such is the price of success, isn't it? You adventurers know the risks better than anyone.
A flash of anger crossed Tritan's face, but he held his tongue. Instead, Mezra stepped forward, her gaze cold as she addressed the nobleman.
This isn't a simple artifact, Lord Grell. It holds something within, something dangerous. I suggest you handle it with extreme caution.
Grell chuckled, the sound low and mocking.
Do not presume to lecture me on magical artifacts. I know well enough what I've acquired.
He snapped his fingers, signaling his servants to take the statue from the adventurers.
Your payment will be provided, as promised. And should I need your services again, I trust you will show the same dedication.
They accepted their reward, though none of them felt particularly triumphant. As they left Grell's estate, Lana weighed the gold in her hand, her face thoughtful.
Hardly seems worth it. Maybe we should pay a visit to Grell's treasury room unannounced to find something there to be fully compensated for all the crap we went through for that statue.
Her usual hunger for wealth tempered by the harrowing journey. Venn, nursing his burned hands, gave a tired smile.
Ah, but it'll make a splendid tale weaved into a song to share with the generous patrons of the nearby tavern, offering us tips and free spirits.
Tritan glanced back at the estate, a grim expression on his face. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had set something in motion, something far beyond Grell's understanding. The dragon statue's curse was now his burden to bear, and only time would reveal what consequences would unfold. But for now, the adventurers walked away, battered yet alive, each of them marked by the darkness they had confronted. And in their hearts, they knew that their journey into Everan had changed them forever.